Hey everyone, it's Vision. I hope you've all been doing well. It's been a while since I worked on a keyboard, so I wanted to do a new board. This is the Gamakay LK67, a 65% keyboard. This comes stock with USB-C, Bluetooth, 2.4 GHz wireless connection when you use the dongle, and also comes with their own Gamakay Phoenix switches, which honestly just seem like browns but a bit louder. The best part is it comes with a hot swappable PCB, which of course making swapping switches so much easier and nicer than having to solder. Now, I don't like to leave my board stock, so we're going to do some upgrades to this board. As you may know, keyboards can be a bit of an expensive hobby, so I like to take affordable boards and add some bits to make it my own. But enough of me, let's get into the sound test. Let's get into the disassembly, which is usually the interesting part to me. As most under $100 boards, disassembly is not always the easiest, especially when you get a unique layout. I really enjoy the separation from the arrow keys and also the other keys for this board, but my plans for this board is we're going to turn this into an old but new board, and I think it's actually my favorite change yet I've done to a board. Disassembly was a bit of a pain. I had to use a plastic tool to wedge between the top and bottom to separate the pressure fittings that are specifically on the top left and top right of the board, and then trying not to break any of the plastic clips. Oh, and the media control circle probably took me a whole 20 minutes to remove without risking snapping any plastic, destroying the knob or board. I grabbed pliers, I tried a bunch of things, but I ended up just forcing it off. Now this board does come with a battery inside of it, which is a nice feature, but I don't really know how long it would hold a charge, and I prefer to keep it plugged in anyway. I'm not much of a battery guy for my mouse and keyboards. That's why I got the wireless Logitech mouse pad, just so I never have to worry about charging it, so I decided just to remove it. I made sure to be cautious when removing the battery, as cracking it, bending, or piercing it could be hazardous and dangerous, so whenever you mess with batteries, always do it safely. I did make sure to swap to the correct tool to get it out, as I found that the first one I was trying to use could have damaged or snapped the battery with enough force. And one of my favorite tools is actually using isopropyl alcohol. It works for cleaning a lot of things, and in this case getting rid of residue. I do also have Goo Off, but it's a bit more expensive. I let it sit on some isopropyl alcohol, then I was able to scrape it away. And yeah, I do realize I need to get a correct scraper or some kind of tool to hold that blade. I didn't feel fully comfortable using that much force to get it off. And with a little prep work to make sure I don't paint over the label. I don't have a good history with removing labels and trying to place them on, so I used some painter's tape, and it actually held up pretty good during the process. I made sure to get in between all the edges, and then use an X-Acto, which I need to replace the blade for that one too, to safely cut around it and not to damage anything. Pardon these beauty shots, but the paint that I used was Rust-Oleum Gloss Protective Enamel in an antique white. The look that I'm going for is an old but new on a new board, and I think it came out pretty nice. So let's get into the, I found out that the initial footage was running at 1 frame a second, so I completely missed all of that. But anyway, I wanted to do a sound mod, so I purchased some Amazon Zoom J sound dampening foam for cars, which I definitely didn't think about when I was buying the board, but the foam was way too thick. As well as the plastic dividers on the inside, I had to use flush cutters to cut the ends of the plastic, and then a plier to bend and pull. And for the foam, I had to use scissors to try to cut it right in half. Definitely not an even layer, but gonna get that unique sound, you know. And voila, perfectly even and straight dampening foam and application. This does add some weight to the board. It feels like it tripled the weight of the bottom. And I did make sure to leave some room on the top and the sides so that the opaque accent lights are still there. Now let's get into the PCB itself. Gamakay, they have their own switches. Gamakay Phoenix switches are on this board, which are louder and a bit clickier than MX Brown switches. But as it will be added to my already 200 switch collection of browns, I'll probably just trash them, which does seem like a waste. Does anyone have any recommendations on what to do with some unused switches? Let me know down in the comments. The best part of the board is that it's hot swappable. No need to spend hours to unsolder and then solder. It's a quick job and allows me to change the switches in the future. And one impressive thing is there's already foam between the metal plate and PCB with a rubber fill at the spacebar too. Normally boards this cheap, I haven't seen them come with it, but I really like that it did. It makes it feel a bit more premium in the end. I will also be using the stabilizers that come with the board. They are no Durock V2 stabilizers, but for keeping this board budget, we will use the existing stabilizers but lubricate with Permatex dielectric grease to make it feel nice. And now that we're done with the PCB, let's get into the fun part, but a bit out of order because past me doesn't understand the order of operations. Now here's the big moment. I painted the board to get an old look, and I bought these keycaps. I didn't even think to bring a keycap to the store to attempt to paint match, so I really hope they match after all this work. And man, I would say it's fate. It came out in here perfect, at least to me. And these keycaps, they feel premium. They are PBT Cherry Profile by Mint Caps, and they really are smooth keycaps. I'm a fan of the standard Cherry Profile, and they don't have an overly smooth or rough texture for the keycaps. They feel just right for me. And now for the switches. EPOMaker comes out with affordable and unique switches. This is the EPOMaker Sea Salt. Now of course you may know the trouble with listening to switches from a video, and definitely you can't feel it, but let me tell you that these switches are smooth. They are heavier than milky yellows, but smoother. They are linear, and the most impressive part is the factory lube. I feel companies are getting better at the factory, so the average person doesn't have to pop open 75 switches and lube them all, even though that is part of the fun. I did lube a few switches originally using Krytox grade 502, and it did make it smoother, but I also felt it alleviated some of the weight as there was less internal friction, so I actually found it better out of the box, and it does make me want to try to find alternatives to Krytox for switches, so yeah, future video idea. After testing all the switches and confirming they're working properly, we finally get to the home stretch. The last part, the big moment. Cool, sick, yeah, well, this is why you test things. So your boy did an oopsie, and basically, if you don't realize, I have to retake apart the entire board, and during the process, you know, scratch the paint during disassembly. But enough venting. I am really happy with how this board came out. I feel like it was a pretty simple build, which I haven't worked on a simple one in a bit. It's nice to try new methods on different boards. Although keyboards normally bake down to 3 things: layout, sound, and feeling, it's nice to try different combinations of it. Although I would like to build some higher end boards, I enjoy the simplicity of it and how to make cheap boards better, but now my biggest worry is where to store all my keyboards. And finally, the sound test. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good one. And yeah, I did realize the 5 key was backwards, but you know, while I was editing.